Hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I'm the youth and family pastor at Cornerstone Church in Marshfield. I'm here today with your Cornerstone Connection, a daily devotional. Perhaps it's your first time with us. We're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining. And I just want you to know that our Cornerstone Connections are aligning with a Bible reading plan that we're doing here at our church, in which we are working our way through the entire Bible in 2 years. So we are reading both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And today, we're going to continue on for this Cornerstone Connection in the book of Exodus. And we're going to be in chapter 35 of Exodus. And the people are just about to get to work on this tabernacle, this very complex and very detailed tabernacle that God has said, I want you to build this for me so that I have a place to meet with you and you have a place to meet with me and to make offerings and all this kind of thing, okay? But as soon as we get to chapter 35, God makes sure through Moses to instruct the people about something before they get to any work. Okay, so here we go. Join me in chapter 35, verse 1, and we'll just read through verse 3. Here's what it says. Moses assembled the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things the Lord has commanded you to do. For 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day shall be your holy day, a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it must be put to death. Do not light a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day." Chapter 35 will go on to detail the work that the Israelites are going to be doing with the materials for the tabernacle and to get this thing built. But God is clear with Moses, and he wants Moses to be clear with the people that first and foremost, they need to remember the Sabbath day. They need to remember and set aside this day as holy to the Lord. And you get to the end of verse 2, and God says through Moses, "Whoever does any work on it must be put to death." And I read that and I go, man, my attention, my mind shifts to the New Testament. In Mark chapter 2, verse 27, when Jesus is having a discussion with some of the leaders, the Pharisees of the day, and they're questioning his disciples' observance of the Sabbath. And Jesus says in Mark 2:27, he says, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." And I love that. It's one of my favorite statements that Jesus gives in the Bible during his time here on earth, and it just reminds me of what the Sabbath is for. It's been made for man. But then I read Exodus 35 and I go, well, God has never changed from Old Testament to New Testament. Why was there such a severe consequence back then? The Sabbath was made for man. Why, if they broke the Sabbath, would the consequence be death? So I had to do some extra study, and I just wanted to share with you, because perhaps in reading this today, you kind of had the same reaction. First of all, I just want to read to you from David Guzik, a commentator that I often will go to. And he writes this. He says, in the coming chapters, this is about Exodus 35, he says, there was a lot of work for Israel to do. They had to build a complex and exact tabernacle of meeting. Yet before they did anything, they should be reminded to enter into God's rest and to respect the Sabbath. So that might help us out here a little bit. But then in reference to whoever does any work on it shall be put to death, he writes, he says, this was a strict call to obedience. Before they did the work of building the tabernacle, God first called Israel to the work of simple obedience. He goes on to say, basic obedience is a prerequisite for doing work for the Lord. Basic obedience is a prerequisite for doing work for the Lord. I don't know about you, but I find those comments and those notes really helpful when I consider the verses in chapter 35 in regards to the Sabbath and this consequence of death if it was broken. And it makes sense that God, in this very disobedient people, these people who had made false gods, even though they had been brought out by the God out of Egypt and saved and protected, and yet as soon as Moses is gone, they start worshiping a calf, right? He's just trying to build obedience in these people. And sometimes, like we do maybe as parents, we put a pretty strict consequence if our kids disobey, in order to just start building basic obedience. But friends, let's not forget this gift of the Sabbath. As Jesus says in Mark 2:27, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Let me challenge all of us. When's the last time you took one? When's the last time you set aside a day to rest in the Lord, and you set aside your work, and you just trusted God that all of that will get done? May we practice the simple obedience of Sabbath and rest in God. Have a great day, friends. We'll see you next time on the Cornerstone Connection.